on its watchdog role as civil society in respect of accountability, transparency, and good governance, and which this is one of the things that we do at civil society, but as Gambia participates as a whole. Reason why we commissioned this survey is for various reasons. When the corona hit, you already said it, we saw so many changes in the socio-economic lives of people. Economies were grappling with funds, and people also were struggling with their daily livelihoods, Gambia inclusive. So when the pandemic first hit, we saw the president or the government allocate 500 million Gambian dollars strictly for to serve as a buffer for the COVID-19 pandemic. Not only that, we also made sure we did commission a survey regarding that to also look at how this money was expended. Absolutely. What were some of the things purchased? Was it put into good use, basically? So I think that was also one of the bedrocks why we decided to also commission another survey when the 734 million was appropriated for the purchase of food supply for Gambian citizenry. The reason why is because when the corona hit, businesses were at a standstill. People were not going on their social activities. Businesses were not functioning as they used to be. So people were basically seated at homes because we had a curfew going on. So there was a certain time people have to go home. There was a certain time people had to step out as well. So when we commissioned this, we simply wanted to look at how transparent it was. 734 million is no small money. They had to purchase over 230,000 bags of rice, 148,000 bags of sugar, and of course oil to be given to deserving households, which is 84% of our population. So we wanted to look at how accountable this was, because we wanted to know the threshold government was also using to to gauge what a needy household is, because when we commissioned this, we looked at so many factors. We looked at the level of income or earning of a particular household, but of course we also looked at who is the head of the household. Reason why we wanted to, because in a typical Gambian society, you understand that it's male dominant, and in most of the households we've been to, only male, most of them are, the households, most of them, the heads are male. So this is how we did it. We collected this data to ensure we know who the household head is, the kind of houses they live in, the income they earn, how many children go to school in that house, how many go to data. This basic information was able to help us ascertain who the deserving household is. But of course, the government used the housing, the GBOS data statistics to be able to gauge who the deserving household members are. So essentially what we did was to look at how transparent it is. Of course, it is not satisfactory, because that is the purpose of research. You want to be able to ascertain some of the, the things that did go wrong, but the things also that did not go right. So as we go, we would talk about so many things that would be uncovered in this research. But just for a start, this is essentially why we engaged in this research.
I know we're so tempted to discuss the findings, which really defines the purpose for which we are here. And I think both of you will help in that discussion. Tell us, you've talked about the method, the research methodology that was used. What was the population, the level or the extent to which you've reached to the population? What was the percentage-wise population of the research? People want to know, maybe, because at the end of the day, by the time we discuss the findings, people will say, oh, how many people did they, speak to? I think that is highly significant in research.
Yeah, it's an evidence-based research. And in any evidence-based research, you must have respondents, of course, who are answering to your questionnaires. So I think we've been to every nook and cranny of this country. We've been to the Central River region, North Bank, URR, NBR, Banjul, West Coast, everywhere. And we also surveyed more than 30 households in a day to be able to ensure we get a data that is representative of the number of people, or a representative data that may be able to speak the minds of people. Like I said, we did this in all 7 regions in this country, and we've been to households. I myself was a part of the team that did this research and this survey myself. And we've been to households in communities, sit with them and ask them these relevant questions. So essentially the data is representative of the people that we have asked. Yeah.
So I know it is important that you visited at least all the regions. You said you've visited every nook and cranny of the country. I'm not sure whether you visited my house also. But quite important in this, before we get into the detail, what was the condition of people, you know, I know the research talks about that. What was the general condition of people? How vulnerable were people you visited?
If we have to tell you the truth, the conditions of the people over there is not really welcoming. You go there, you find communities that are really deserving, because I think we've been to a community where people still drink from well water, uncovered well. And I asked this question, do you drink from this water? And they say yes. I'm like, you don't sterilize it? They're like, no, we don't do that. So that is just to tell you the level of poverty that is manifesting in communities in provincial Gambia, not essentially in the Combos here. Because if you have to put them on a scale, you see our ratio is like 10:5, because, or 10:2, because the level of poverty in the provincial Gambia really did manifest in our research to show that in households over there, we also, one of our research questions was to look at the income level of the household heads. The margin was from 0 to 5,000, 1,000. We have 5,000 to 10,000, and from 10,000 to 20,000. And funnily, I mean, like literally all of them didn't even have an earning that you know, accumulated up to 20,000 Gambian dollars. That is just to show you the level of poverty that prevails in provincial Gambia. So these are some of the things that we uncovered during this research.
So the ground, that is it was a necessity for government to intervene, because the poverty of the people was deepened by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and an emergency response by the government was quite necessary, like in many countries in Africa and around the world. Let me now introduce my colleague, Omar Ba. Omar Ba is a journalist, and he works for the Standard newspaper. Tell me, as a journalist, how important was it for civil society and media to take part in this process of ensuring there is accountability and transparency of the government's emergency response?
I think my sister has already said it all in terms of the role and responsibility and what was required, of course, from civil society. And I think Gambia Participate has led that process to the best of their ability. And I was lucky to be among the journalists who took part in the stories that they did.
So while they were researching, you were publishing.
While they were researching, I was dealing with those responsible of these monies that were supposed to be expended in the areas of food and other issues that relates to relief support. I think the role the Gambia Participate played was very significant. I think they were able to highlight some of the weaknesses in terms of accountability in the areas of procurement, for instance. During our findings, we realized that the government, the first mistake they made was initially to have both the authorities, the arbiters, and those who were supposed to hold them accountable in a committee that was responsible for procurement.
Yes, let me just come in there.
Yeah.
And the count of, in most instances, is that we were dealing with a pandemic, an emergency.
Yeah.
The procurement rules and the regulations were not there to determine an emergency response like that. And basically, as a result, something like that needed to be at least put in place to ensure there was swift response.
I think those are ridiculous claims.
Yes, yes.
That,
We've
that
seen
people
the procurement, the procurement bill, which now it is an act because it has already been, not yet act because I'm not sure whether the president has assented to it, but it has been passed. One of the areas that they've highlighted was the fact that, the lessons that they've learned from the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of, the need for emergency response. So that emergency procurement bit was also, at least incorporated. Maybe that was the argument that they were trying to put forward.
That's what I'm saying. I think that
so
is.
You believe it's a flimsy
for me, that is flimsy and so ridiculous because this is very simple. When the COVID started, and the time they start the procurement of these foodstuffs, you can measure at least few months were in between. So they cannot tell us they didn't have the time to ensure that due process was followed. I think they were also aware of the fact that they were making a big mistake in having in the same committee the GPPA, which is supposed to deal with issues of procurement, in the same committee with those officials that were responsible for expending these monies. In all sense, it wouldn't make sense to have the arbiter and those who are supposed to hold them accountable in the same committee making decisions together. So that was the first mistake they made.
So without sorry to come in, I think you are highlighting very important issues that the public should at least understand. The counterclaim usually also in that regard is that government's bureaucracy, we all know how government's bureaucracy works, the procedures, sometimes when you send a letter before they reply, when we talk about government's bureaucracy, we're referring to the procedures, the processes of which it will take for decisions to be taken. And in an emergency, would it not be wise to at least tailor-make the situation and solve issues?
Those are the arguments that they put in place. Even when I was having an interview with the NDMA boss, that's what he told me.
So you are not convinced?
For me, my worry is when you are spending, when you are expending taxpayers' money, there has to be accountability in the way you expend it. It doesn't matter what situation.
So that's the rule of law.
For me, due process should have been followed. And following due process would not necessarily mean probably it will take time. No. Government bureaucracy come into play when an outsider wants something in government. When they want something, there is no bureaucracy. They go straight to the point and get what they want. So really, even at that point, I believe the government could have been able to follow due process, make sure every other procurement that is beyond $1 million goes through GPPA vetting before it is awarded. We have seen even companies awarded, companies that are not even registered with the company registrar. A lot of companies, individuals were just picked individually and given contracts. We have realized that during our findings. These individuals are friends of ministers, friends of government officials. This is undone. This is unacceptable.
How were you able to ascertain whether they are friends of ministers? Is this evidence-based argument you're making?
Absolutely. Some of them.
Where did you get your findings?
I wouldn't name names, but I know there are people that I know that I make findings on, and I know.
You may not necessarily need to name names. Yeah. You can tell us your method of getting.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to explain. That's what I'm trying to explain. This country is small. You know, we all know who is close to who, almost. People that are close to me. If I am the minister today and you realize that I give a project to Alaji Mane or Tabora of the Standard, and you know very well they don't have companies, they don't have businesses, it will ring a bell to you. You will say, what is happening? You will start asking questions. So this is what happened in investigation.
So it's based on your judgment?
No, not only my judgment. When I see those names, when I saw those names, it rings a bell. And when it rings a bell, I make follow-ups with people who know. And they tell me, this is the relationship between this minister, and this guy.
And you trust the, your sources?
This is why if you read the story, you don't see the names there. Okay. We just highlighted it. The possibilities of these people being given this contract because of their relationship with these people. There are probabilities that they were given these contracts based on that, but we did not mention them because we didn't deep to make sure that we know really this was on the basis that they were awarded the contracts. So, but I know, and I have speak to a lot of people who told me the relationship between these people and those who were responsible of giving these contracts.
Thank you very much, Omar. You've already gotten us into the major points, talking points. I was only asking you to tell me how important the role of civil society and the media in this process. And I think you've been tempted to get into the details, but we wouldn't strangle you for that. We will continue. Let's get into the discussion proper, that is on the report which has been published by Gambia Participates on the government's emergency response, procurement of food items worth 734 million. You've already indicated the research method that was used. Tell us about the findings now. What have been the the highlights of these findings? What are the most interesting things that you believe the public should know?
Yes, Choi. So clearly, one of the most interesting things that people should have known about or should know about is the level of corruption that manifested during the distribution of these materials. Because when we go to these communities, we make sure to know the closest distribution point to that community. Others received outside their communities, others received within their communities. We don't know how the distribution went about, or probably there's an internal agreement that we are not sure about. But some of the things that really manifested, like I said, is the massive rate of corruption. Because we go to these communities and you understand there are certain people who are given coupons, but still don't have access to getting a bag of rice, a bag of sugar, or even a gallon of oil. And they're still given coupons because the coupon is the threshold, or is the identity to show for the fact that you were supposed to be collecting a food item, or your family is supposed to be collecting a certain number of bags of rice, a certain number of a bag of sugar. But these are some of the things that manifest as some other people are there given these coupons but still do not have rice, no oil, nor a bag of sugar. That is done. That said and done, there are others also who have been given the limited, a lesser number that they're supposed to have. Because you see an entire household of 10 people or 9, and you give them 1 bag of rice, 1 bag of sugar, and maybe 5-liter gallon of oil, which is not even able to sustain those people for even a month, depending on the mouths that are there to feed in that household. So it is clearly unfortunate that these are some of the things that happen.
Yes. Let me interject there, at least to give people context about the findings on what you're talking about. The data is very important here. The report on missing food items from household surveyed, which shows that about 78% of households reported that they have a missing oil. About 26 and 27 of the respondents indicated missing food items. 26 and 27 indicated they have missing sugar and missing rice respectively. Oil is the most reported missing food item. So these are some of the things that you're talking about. 78% of households having missing oil, which is quite staggering for you,
that is essentially data speaking. It doesn't lie. These are evidence-based research.
Is it not the opinion, what people tell you, you're relying on as evidence? What people tell you?
No, because we've been to communities who've shown us their coupons. I think it's blue-collared sort of. They've shown us their coupons, and they'll tell us this is the amount of the rice we have, the number of gallons of oil we had. I don't think these people have cause to lie, because at the end of the day, you are not giving them anything in return. These are their honest opinions about how the entire process went about. So our evidence is fact-based as far as we are concerned, and as far as the research we've conducted is concerned. So there is no foul play in our process, that the method we employed in commissioning this research.
Yes, because for the purpose of accountability, transparency matters. Let's talk about the issue of transparency. How transparent, because these are the questions that you raised, how transparent, corruption-free, and effective has the government's emergency food response been during the COVID-19 pandemic?
I mean, I think corruption began from the start, the outset, like Omar just highlighted, the procurement process. Yes, 734 million was being commissioned to be given, to be used to purchase rice and all. I mean, basic essential things that people would need in a household. But come to think of it, the procurement process took 96 hours, if I'm not wrong, because I remember it was April 23rd, 2020. When GPPA decided to, Ministry of Trade decided to, commence the purchase of all of these food items. And can you imagine the bidding process? GPPA approval took 96 hours. Clearly, they have flouted one, the procurement procedures. That is one. Two, the transportation aspect of it. Because
you mean the procurement procedure? What are you referring to? What is the procedure?
That is, the call for tender for the suppliers to be able to, say, okay, we are able to supply this amount of bags of sugar, this amount of bags of rice. It has to go through due process according to the GPPA Act, like the current Act. So this has not been abided by, and that is one, that was one failure.
Do you mean entirely or partly?
I would say entirely, Omar, because like I said, it took...
You're calling me Omar
Choi,
now.
it took 96 hours. Clearly, that is not in the GPPA Act.
Okay.
So this is where the discrepancy is, right from the procurement process. And then you go to the transportation aspect. That is where most of these bags of rice and sugar, started. Exactly, because they reported a story that a number of soldiers stole a certain bag of rice and a certain bag of sugar, and this was evidence-based. It was not just a hearsay thing. So that was actually also another problem. Now you go to the distribution aspect of it. That is where the perception of people come in. Because others feel they have not been giving the rice and the amount of, the bags of sugar they deserve, or the bags of rice they deserve, or even the gallons of oil that they deserve. So this is where the problem is, right from the procurement process to the distribution and then to the transportation process. This is where the issue really lies.
Yes, one of the issues that the audit report highlighted was the lack of needs assessment. Don't you think maybe perhaps because of that, the government's response could not provide for everyone while some items were missing? Can that be, the basis for which people will say, okay, they've distributed everything, but because they did not do needs assessment, that might have led to, I'm not trying to be their lawyer here, but is that, substantial enough to have missing items, food items like oil, sugar, and...
If you ask me, I wouldn't say that could be,
So here you're talking about the research
exactly.
Findings, not on your own opinion.
Yeah, exactly. So according to research, they could have done a needs assessment because Gambia has data.
Did you?
The household survey for GBOS has data of the number of households in this country, and the needs of people. They know the number of poor households.
Demographic detail.
Exactly. They have that. GBOS has that, and also National Nutrition Agency also has that, because it was through the recommendation of National Nutrition Agency that the NAFAQUIC money was being distributed, because 1,400 was allocated for the purchase of gallons of oil, another 1,000 for the purchase of a bag of rice, and then another 1,000 for the purchase of food items, essential food items. That is what amounted to $3,000. And I think that was the basis why the NAFAQUIC came in. So you can see there was a needs assessment. So it came through National Nutrition Agency, who gave the recommendation that this amount should be able to sustain a family in provincial Gambia. So they have data. It's not like they don't have it. They actually, exactly. So they just essentially flouted the rules, but they could have used that data to their own benefit. Do a proper needs assessment, then act according to that. It would have actually saved the situation. of, you know, there would have been some level of accountability and transparency in the entire process. But because, I mean, in the absence of that, people begin to question, you know, the accountability process of, you know, of the process. So this is where we are at. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Fanta Sane.
That's right.
Sane, program, let me be very careful. Fanta Sane, the program assistant for Gambia, participates. Viewers, for those of you who are just joining in right now, we're discussing a very important topic, joined by a journalist and a member of the civil society organization, Gambia Participates. What we're discussing is government's emergency response to COVID-19, the food aspect. We understand that 734 million was approved by the National Assembly. Initially 500 million, and there were, you know, some additional amount approved by the National Assembly in a supplementary appropriation bill. Essentially 734 million was approved, and government started purchasing food items to help the people, because almost everyone was affected by the impact of COVID-19. So food items were procured and distributed to at least 84% of Gambians. How transparent, corruption-free and effective has that process been? Was it transparent? Was it effective? Was it corruption-free? There have been some findings. Gambia Participates as a leading civil society organization in physical transparency, anti-corruption, did some a survey, and I think I'm right to say some survey, because the one that was done was about the 500 million.
The Corona Gambia and the millions.
Yes, and the millions. And finally, the latest one has been published. So these are the things that we're discussing on this program. Omar, we've heard from Sani talking about some of the findings, not all of it, but the most important part of it, highlighting corruption, the issue of lack of transparency and ineffectiveness of the government's emergency response food items. As a journalist reporting for a newspaper, what did you do to ensure the public were duly informed and accountability takes place? Because accountability matters wherever there is corruption.
Yeah, from the beginning of COVID, initially when that very committee was formed, we did a story about it, and we raised the alarm surrounding the possibilities of having issues in terms of accountability, because if you have the government officials who are responsible directly with the procurement and all the other issues that surround the expenditure of COVID in a committee, that you also have the GPPA represented by their boss and other senior officials. So basically, you have everybody in that committee, the arbiters and those who should hold them accountable, like I said initially. So we raised that alarm initially. Every other issue that happened, afterward, including the audit report. In fact, I was the first journalist to report on the audit report that, in fact, highlighted that even the monies they expended on the food procurement was beyond what was approved by the National Assembly. You are talking about 74 million. According to the audit report, everything was around 909 million. But the remaining millions were not explained explicitly by those who spent them. So they could not justify how that was spent. And that is because they have a lot of businesses that they hired. One, some of them were not registered, like I said. Two, some of them don't even have business deeds. They did not submit contracts. Majority of the businesses that were awarded. The other issue was people were just awarded contracts randomly. People don't even know about this simply because they were not transparent. They did not tell us the companies that were awarded. these contracts that I believe we should know, because
So
it's part of communication.
That's transparency.
The transparency. So individuals who were awarded, you know, will be talking to their friends, tell them, friends they trust, tell them I was awarded a contract, and you know, this is my profit. I know somebody who even said he has about $500,000 from, you know, the contract he was given. He never registered a business. You know, that was just a favor. Boy, come and eat. You know, you are part of it. So, you know, these and many other issues happen.
Yes.
But
yes.
we didn't know about them because the government was not transparent in terms of, you know, communication. These things should have been communicated.
Yes, you're talking about the fact that the government was not transparent in terms of communication. We all know what we have been informed is that government was procuring food items to cushion the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19 on the people, that this was a response for the people suffering. And it turned out in the findings of a survey, which is evidence-based, because when you want to you know, investigate and know, gather the facts, we wouldn't have come here, and then, you know, we wouldn't have invited you to come and discuss this if it was not evidence-based. So this was a research. At the end of the day, based on the research and the audit report findings, you've been publishing stories. The intention was to support the Gambians, but it turned out, according to research findings, that there have been some misappropriation of public money, taxpayers' money. Have you been reaching out to government for them to explain their own side of this story? What have they been saying? Have they been open to some of the findings that you've been publishing? Maybe we all know how access to information sometimes, how difficult it can be. But to what extent did you go as a journalist to ensure that they were provided the platform to clear the air on some of these, you know, significant, scandalous revelations by, you know, the audit reports and, you know, the surveys by Gambia participants?
Of course, in that committee, and in terms of also responsibility, the GPPA boss, or let me say the GPPA and the National Disaster Management were one of the two among the most important people in that committee that was responsible for the procurement of food relief, because the relief itself will go through the National Disaster Management to the people. So their boss should know, or the office should know, how these monies were, how these distributions were done, whether the monies that people are talking about were really expended in this. The GPPA should be able to tell us whether due process was followed. And I managed to speak to all of them. And I have to commend the NDMA boss. He was so open. We had nearly 2 hours discussion on this. But I know there were issues that his hands was a little bit tight, because he knows probably I have evidence that he cannot dispute, but he will not also want to comment on, because it will contradict what his own committee has reported to the auditors. So I managed to speak to these two people, which I think are very important. I managed also to speak to others who were in the committee, but were not willing to be mentioned. But they were frank. They told me what they know. Some of them even admitted that, you know, there were mistakes here and there, but that also has to do with probably the fact that the country has not experienced things like this for years. So these things, or let me say never. So these things really caught them by surprise. So everything they do was done in a rush, because they wanted to respond. But also always, as a journalist, as civil society, for us what we always think about is whether due diligence was followed. For us, we don't look at the pressure that is there. For us, we think it doesn't matter what the situation is. There should be little margin for error, especially when it comes to transparency and accountability. So this is why the Gambia Participate followed the money. They followed everything from the beginning to end. This is why journalists who are working on the COVID and every other thing that has to do with COVID followed the money. So we were just looking at the transparency aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that is for us, that is the most important thing. Because the transparency aspect of it is it's not just the money that is expended. It's also how those foodstuffs were distributed. Like she highlighted. In some areas, 75% of families said they didn't receive rice or oil or other things. So this is all part of the accountability. Even if it was purchased, it did not reach the people who were supposed to benefit from it. And these monies were already released and approved, of course, and released already. So they are with them. So we should know why these people were given one and not the other, and why others are given in full. They should also know, and this is why we are here. So a lot of issues happen. But when you talk to anybody or whosoever is in that committee, the only thing they will tell you is this was an emergency situation. But if you push them, they also know it doesn't matter what it is. There is no law in the Gambia that provides for emergency situations. All what they did, they just did it their own way. The law, the procurement law is very clear. What it says is, no matter what, if you are spending taxpayers' money, anything that is more than $1 million should go through procurement, through GPPA, and should be vetted before you spend it. So you give individuals who don't even register business companies 33 million Gambian dollars. They don't even tender, they didn't even bid for them. They were just called. The auditors highlighted it. It was just not what people told me. The auditors highlighted it, that individuals were given up to $33 million to purchase food. They don't even register. They don't have businesses registered with the GPPA. So these were serious violations of the procurement law. And until today, nobody is held accountable for it. So this is the sad part of it. These are evidence that were not only produced by journalists and civil society. An organization of government, the National Audit Office, did a rigorous work on this.
Which is an independent
but also a government-subvented institution. They don't get their money from EU or anybody, anywhere. We pay them. Their budget is from the national budget. So that institution is an institution of government, independent, of course, of any executive influence as far as we think. And as far as we know also, we know is one of the most critical accountability institution over the past years. The audit office has been really doing a wonderful job. We all know that. So really, this is what happened. And the excuse of it was an emergency, we are not used to it, it's the first time this thing is happening, for me is just flimsy. And we should really start rethinking as a country. We need to be serious.
Thank you. We'll talk about the way forward.
Yeah.
What should we do?
Yeah.
What should we learn?
Yeah.
What should we have done better?
Yeah.
And what could be done to remedy the situation? He talked about the fact that the National Audit Office did report similarly. Yeah. Maybe they would have even accessed more facts than you could.
Definitely.
Because they are mandated by law to request information from ministries about how public money was spent, what were the problems. All those things highlighted in the audit report and submitted to the National Assembly. That is now public information for everyone on their website. The Gambia participates also releasing this survey highlighting similar findings by the National Audit Office, which is an independent institution of government. Of course, we have to be very proud of the fact that it is also part of the executive, but it is an independent institution trying to hold government accountable on public, expenditure of public funds and resources. Now, accountability, when there are corruptions, when there are malpractices, misappropriation of fund, what people think about is, how do we hold these people accountable? What should we do for accountability? Is the Gambia participate only conducting surveys and telling people, oh, this is what we have done, this is what we have done, these are the findings? That is highly important in ensuring that there is informed public opinion. Yeah. We are not saying what has been done is bad. This is part of the watchdog role of civil society proactiveness, which has been displayed by the Gambia participate in similar engagements. We've seen the courts. Those achievements have been registered. But what would you do to ensure that perhaps, similar to what has been done, at the level of the courts, what else are you doing to ensure at least you support that issue of accountability?
Like you said, I mean, accountability is not one man's job.
Absolutely.
To do. It is not only Gambia Participate's job to do as well.
It's collective.
Exactly.
What is the Gambia Participate?
Concerted effort. Yes. So as far as we are, as far as where we are right now, this is
part of helping
part of the things we do to disseminate, because when this data was collected, we had to filter it, analyze it, come up with this report. We didn't only come here to the radio, to the TV to disseminate the findings of this report. We went to provincial Gambia. I think we've been to at least 3 communities where this survey was commissioned to tell the people. We came here sometime last year in March 2021 to collect this data from you, and this is the data
report
that
back.
Exactly, you report back to the citizenry. This is what we do. I think this is what government fails to do sometimes. You spend taxpayers' money, and you don't come back to them to report how the money was being expended, what was being purchased, and why do we have a balance of this, and why don't we have a balance of this. You simply have to communicate. And I think there's one thing civil society has been definitely good at is communicating. Okay. Because when we went to these households, these communities, we convene them and tell them, this is the research, the information that we collected, the data, and this is how we filtered, analyzed it, and this is the data speaking. This is what you people, this is your perception.
So, very briefly, we're running out of time. How have the public been reacting to these survey findings? What have they been saying? It's
just appalling, because you go to communities and they're like, yes, a team of young people came here and collected this data. A young man from Bunyadi stood up and said, did you just say 734 million? I said, yes. He's like, even if it's every Gambian having $1 million, that money still wouldn't be exhausted. I'm like, clearly, you already stated the facts, right? But apparently, this is how it went down, and it was without your knowledge, and this is why we're here, to tell you this information, so you can also, take it up as your own initiative to hold your government accountable. Ask your public officials these relevant informations.
Yes, we have 2 minutes more, Mr. Ba. I know this is a very important time for us to wrap up. Maybe what is the most important part you would like us to conclude on this program? What will you say?
You asking me my concluding remarks?
Yes. Because we are wrapping up the program.
Yeah, I think, like I said, there are a lot of issues that really this government will need to do right. And thank God, like you said, that process has started with the reviewing of the procurement laws and other things. And I hope, moving forward, this would help in terms of guiding the process to ensure that all the time due process is followed, because this is important for any country.
Thank you. Yes.
Well, this is just a closing remark, as we tell the government that 2 wrongs don't make a right, because it's an emergency. It doesn't
so you were not,
the rules.
It wasn't a witch hunting exercise.
Oh, definitely. It was not a witch hunt, because that is why we commissioned the Corona, the Gambia, and the millions.
What did you want to achieve in 30 seconds?
Oh, we want the government to be simply communicating back to people and be responsible each time they spend people's money, taxpayers' money, because it's really important that people know where their monies have been expended and, report back to them no matter what happens. It's really important to have an informed society.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Sani. Thank you very much,
Mr.
Ba.
Thank you, Mr.
for joining us. It has been a huge pleasure having you on this platform, special edition brought to you by Gambia Participates on the findings from a survey which they conducted about the government's emergency response on food procurement and distribution. Has it been transparent? Was it transparent, corruption-free, and effective? The research showed there were some misappropriations. Thank you very much. That's all we had time for. Until next time, goodbye.